Thanks so much for having us, and apologies for the little stumble to begin with. My name is Audrey Carson. I'm a science writer at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and I'm just getting us started. Jason Wohlgemuth is the solution scientist. He's done all the work in Rust, but we're here to talk about our project that is sort of unique in that it brings two of these different worlds together for a project centered around research activity data. That's the RAD in our Rust is RAD. So we'll talk about a science communication infrastructure around research activity data that's enabled through a Rust CLI application. And as a friend of mine mentioned, this is more of a data project that's sort of disguised as a comms project. So we'll get into it. So as I mentioned, we're a scientist and a writer at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and we happen to have our desks across from each other. And we found out that we were separately looking for ways to understand all the research being done at the laboratory. So what does ORNL do? Jason was looking for it for a list of projects and PIs so he could understand where to better apply his skills as a scientist and where he could plug in. I was looking for it just because I wanted to see what our fact sheets, our existing fact sheets, look like, how we're communicating our research. And we both found that this didn't exist holistically, and that where we did have pieces of communication about research projects, they weren't communicated consistently. There were different pieces of the project captured, and it really didn't tell the whole story. So this project started as sort of a more efficient way to capture fact sheets in one directorate at the National Lab, but it really started to evolve into a way to data mine all the research activity data that we have at a national lab, which, as you might imagine, is quite a lot. So we have ways to understand all the different things that are linked to a person at the laboratory through the ORC IDs or ORCID. You can see all the different projects a researcher has contributed to over their career span as a researcher. And we know that publications are a way to track sort of snapshots in time of research being done. But we seem to be coming in at a unique inflection point in the research ecosystem in that projects are primitive. So we're not just trying to fix fact sheets, we're really trying to fix science at a bigger level. And so how do we start to encompass this and collect it? So we wanted to create a process where researchers maintained autonomy of their project data. So as a communications person, usually that back and forth looked like, we want a fact sheet. And so I would say, all right, tell me about your project. And I'd get some kind of really, really long thesis that really wasn't effective at communicating the main points we needed to know about that research activity data, or that the people who need to know about it want to know. So whether that's taxpayers or job seekers or sponsors or potential partners, they need to know specific pieces of data. And so there's a lot of back and forth that includes editorial review, that includes supervisor approval, things like that. So we wanted to make sure researchers could stay in charge of communicating their projects while maintaining editorial review. We want to make sure that those approvals are easy and anyone who plays a part in that project can have comments on it. And we wanted to generate especially analysis-ready data. And so that's the part that I'll kind of pass the baton over to Jason to talk about how we started to build an infrastructure that better communicates science.
All right, so you've heard me and you've heard and seen Audrey, and now you've seen me. So in our two-man team, Audrey was describing how the problem that we're trying to address, and we're at this venue to talk about how we used Rust, at least as part of the solution, for that problem, right? And so what did we do? We made an iterative machine-assisted editorial review process. And you can maybe guess by the color coding where Rust falls in. So, of course, the iterative is referring to the fact that we leverage the GitLab architecture or the GitLab service that we have on at ORNL. It could be any GitLab, it could even be GitHub. But I would think most programmers would be familiar with the issue and the merge requests and CI/CD capabilities. We leverage that to update our data. So we call them buckets of research activity data, where each research activity data is inside a folder and is essentially a JSON file. And that JSON file has all the metadata and the information about the research activity data, and that's where the machine assist comes in. And so I've been very fond recently of saying, oh yeah, we have an iterative machine assisted editorial review. My Rust CLI is the machine and the machine assisted. So here's the here's the entrance of Rust into the talk. It's a CLI app written in Rust, and it's not just an app written in Rust because I like Rust. It actually has, in my mind, very compelling reasons to prefer Rust. And I like the idea that I was talking about is because we're very meta, right? So we're talking about how to use Rust to feasibly use Rust in some projects, right? Like that's my dream, right? To have eventually get to the point where I'm not the only person at Oak Ridge writing Rust, although there are maybe 3 or 4. Like you can count them on one hand, or like even a Ninja Turtle hand, or a thing from the Fantastic Four hand. And so that does all those things, and I would love to show you these things, but with 10 minutes, I'm probably already talking faster than I normally do. And so the machine assisted feeds into the editorial review, which is, you might guess, one of the bigger roles that Audrey plays in this role. So imagine you're on a programming project and you have a set of lint rules, and if you're on JavaScript project, you have ESLint. If you're on Python, you use Rough. You're on a Rust project, you use the built-in cargo format and cargo Clippy, which is built in and amazing and inherently better than all those other things I mentioned. And so that gets you to a point where your syntax is good. You don't have any errors that will prevent compilation and stuff like that. But it doesn't really say the content is good, right? So imagine you have words in the mix, and sentences and paragraphs and meanings and purpose. And so we do the typical checks that you might expect, like word count or character count, the structure of the JSON, URLs are URLs, emails are emails, a certain number of bullets and stuff like that. And then we leverage a separate application called Veil to do prose analysis. Veil is a really, really cool tool I would advocate anybody to use. And then on top of that, after all of our automated check, after the machine is done doing its machine assisting, then we can leverage the review and comment and collaboration process inherent to GitLab to enable people like Audrey to then really do that big brain, higher context thinking as applied to what we're working on. So when we're working on science, you know, it's kind of good to use as much of your brain as you can because it's not exactly trivial most of the time. So this is a quick, well, I guess it's not quick. I'm going to make it quick by showing it quick, but this is a overview of our process in general, where kind of the data goes in the top, goodness happens in the middle, and then artifacts come out on the right. And so submitter would be a researcher or a communication specialist or something like that. And then I guess you can't see my mouse, can you? Or can you? No, you can't.
Yes, I can see your mouse, yeah.
Oh, terrific. So you see me just feverishly circling it. Okay. So the refinement happens both machine assisted and with human beings doing applying their understanding of science. And then it gets published. Once again, we call them buckets of distributed buckets, which contains information, and all facilitated by ACORN. And then ACORN also takes that data and provides the automation to generate targets like a PDF, PowerPoint, website, all those things, so that the researcher doesn't have to do those things. They can just focus on the content and then get a visualization essentially out for free. And so another way to look at it is ACORN, things go on the left and things come out the right. And so generally on the left, we have global unique IDs, persistent identifiers, the kind of the metadata and the information about a project. With the schemas in its own right, the schema that ACORN uses is literally us codifying the structure of research and the future of science in our mind. And automation is the immediately obvious capabilities of software to make these things on the right. And this has a note for those that know it. It's also really cool. We recently built using the muscle target to have a highly portable binary. And so as a final thing, I know we can't say too much with the details. I know I've seen code, but I wasn't going to try that. I just wanted to highlight very quickly some of the crates that served us well and were strong enablers for this research and this capability, so that you just know. So most of them might be familiar, but real going through them. It's CLAP. I mean, you can't really make a CLI in my mind with Rust without CLAP. Indicative is for progressy bars. I mean, it's pretty cool feedback. Comfy table is the nicest table I've seen. BAT is an alternative for CAT. generally as a command line tool, but it also has a Rust library that you can use for pretty printing syntax highlighted content. And then exit code just standardizes the codes that you use when you fail. Okay, another probably obvious is Saturday. That's what we do for all deserialization and serialization. Validator gets easily applied using annotations for validation rules. And then schema-rs, I'm not sure how they say it, can automatically take our struct that we use to define research activity data and generate a JSON schema that we can then share with other projects or capabilities. Rayon and Tokyo, enough said at this point. I think Rayon, every video I've seen so far in this project, in this conference, has mentioned Rayon. And okay, my favorite maybe is Bond. I point that out the Bond. It allows you to easily add a builder interface to any struct that you create. So it's just really, really cool. Drive More and CrabTon are similarly neat. They make it easier to do more with less. I mean, the less exists somewhere, but it's not something you have to write. And then finally, as we move into the future, there's a lot more that we didn't talk about with the research goals and the broader purpose, but those will involve Sophia and NanoPub for linked data, JSON LD, and nano publications. So as you can see, my pace got faster and faster, and that's it. So we pretty much gave in a nutshell of our project and where we're at. I appreciate your time.